Saturday, January 19th, 2019, Monaco 64, home of alternative economics and contrarian views. This afternoon, I want to talk about geopolitics, the world we live in. I won't dwell too much into the markets today and economics. It is a little bit of a change, but I think it's very important. Just to show how uncertain the world is, how uncertain things are, and how things are not as they are, as they seem, in my opinion. And to do that today, I'm going to cover one of my favorite analysts, a man by the name of Christopher Story. And Christopher Story died in 2010, so unfortunately he's not around anymore. I think he was a great loss for the world. He was a great, not only geopolitical, but economic and also market analyst. So I'll go over a little bit Christopher's story. Here on Wikipedia, it says Christopher Edward Harl Story was an English writer, publisher, and government advisor specializing in intelligence and economic affairs, who is perhaps best known for his collaboration with KGB defector Anatoly Golitsyn on the 1995 book The Perestroika Deception. Christopher Story, the son of Colonel Henry Harl Story of the Cameronians, was educated at Eton and Christ Church, Oxford, and then worked as an industrial writer in Canada. In 1963, he formed his own publishing company specializing in intelligence and founded World Reports Limited that year. What else does it say? Since 1970, Story edited and published International Currency Review, which has included the World Bank, the Federal Reserve, and the Bank of England amongst its subscribers. Story became an economic advisor to Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher, and in 1991, a year after her resignation, he published Soviet Analyst due to his continued skepticism about Mikhail Gorbachev, Perestroika, and the official version of events in the Soviet Union. Soviet Analyst was a respected journal whose previous editors included Robert Conquest and Tibor Zamuli. So it also says, in 2002, Story published the European Union Collective, which applied Story's analysis to the European Union. He was also critical of the German intelligence establishment, pointing out its Nazi origins. Story claimed that former British Prime Minister Edward Heath was recruited by Germans before the war and was an agent of the secret Nazi strategic continuum since exposed as a Deutsche Verteidigungsdienst, or DVD, in Dachau. Story claimed that successive European collective treaties have been routinely procured by means of bribery, and that there was a corrupt financial incentive for the ratification of the Treaty of Lisbon, which entered into force in 2009. Story claimed that slush fund money was being paid into offshore bank accounts and top facilitators of the treaty. So, very interesting. I followed Christopher's Story for many years, up until he died in 2010. Even before the 2008 crisis, I read his website, worldreports.org, which unfortunately doesn't exist anymore, is not there anymore. His analysis was great, and I even called him because he provided his phone number, and I actually went to meet him in his office in London, and we had a really nice chat. Christopher Story, and he wrote a very interesting book, which luckily I do have, but I will provide the viewers a link to a PDF version, and it's free. I looked in Amazon on Amazon, and the book now, the physical book, goes for almost £1,000, sometimes even more. Of course, I'm not going to sell it, but you can look at the PDF. It's a wealth of information. I mean, it's if you really want to understand what could be going on in the world. And the thing that I get about Mr. Story's book, writings and what he says, that is that unless you have contacts with the right people, what's happening, what we're told out there, that we can get, doesn't touch what is really happening. So what does that mean? Well, that means that the most important thing about the world right now, in my opinion, is uncertainty, deception, mayhem. And what do you really want to be exposed financially to markets that are run by what Christopher Story calls Synarchy, a corrupt, how can I say, underworld. He calls it the river of Styx, which is from Greek, from the Greek, and it's very. This is not for people who don't want to dig down, dig deep, go down the rabbit hole to try to understand the world. And I have done it for many years, and I still don't. So the book is The New Underworld Order: Triumph of Criminalism, Dark Actors Playing Games, The Global Fantasies of the Geomasonic Illuminati. And Christopher Story, I mean, when I met him, I forgot exactly what year it was, probably between '08, around the financial crisis, '07, '08. He even told me he was at Oxford when Jacob Rothschild was there. So this is the book here. That's the book. And I mean, it's very thick. You don't have to read it, in order. There's different sections that are very interesting. And I've made a few notes about the book. And the interesting word he talks about is synarchy, which is weird because it's a word that's not used very often. We don't hear it that much on YouTube or on the alternative. We hear more deep state, shadow government. But synarchy, as Mr. Story explains, is the rule by secret societies. And according to him, the Illuminati are still in charge, and very interesting. So one of the things that I thought, an interesting point he made, he talks about Machiavelli, who wrote The Prince, and I quote from Machiavelli. He says, "The great majority of mankind are satisfied with appearances as though they were realities, and often more influenced by things that seem than by those that are." So that's all about deception, isn't it? And that's why for me, it's I haven't made my mind up about Brexit, about Donald Trump, about the yellow vests. Sometimes things are not what they seem, as Machiavelli said. So I'll keep going. This thing about the river Styx, it's Styx. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing it right. It could be River Styx or Styx. And I quote here from the New Underworld Order. It says here, the ancient Greeks recognized this phenomenon. Their image for it was the river Styx, the black underground river that rushes in the depths of darkness to Hades. And Christopher Story goes on to say, this agonized report is all about the river Styx, which is overflowing its subterranean confines, has erupted to the surface and is flooding all over the West's financial and political institutions. And I remember it was around July 2007. I used to read every week his reports, and I remember this day it came out, the crisis starts now. And I think, and he was right on cue, Christopher Story. I think what happened 07, 08, 09 is part of something, in this synarchy system. It's people, conflict between groups that we don't even know exist. Yeah, I mean, it just opened my eyes. It says, and he says, in the United States, the political system is literally drowning in this black flood, the river Styx. I guess that would be the swamp. I'm not going to speculate about Trump. I think only time will tell if what he's doing is the right thing. And what is the right thing? Well, the right thing is to get, honest, law-abiding government, because what we've had, I think, for many, many years is criminal government, as Christopher Story talks about. Christopher Story talks about how everything has been run really by the intelligence services, which are basically an instrument of the order. And the order he talks about is the Illuminati, actually. He says it all evolved from Adam Weishaupt, who was employed by the Rothschild family. So there you go. And this guy went to school with the Rothschilds. So I'll go into some of what he says here in the beginning of the book. There's some interesting stuff. It says, finally, it will become clear as this book unfolds that German secret black intelligence exploits the order of the Illuminati as its densest, most effective cover. So why German? Well, because it was started out in Bavaria, right? So that's, and the Rothschilds, that's the origin. And he thinks it's still around. And I'll come to that in a minute. It says the Abwehr intelligence continuum, and he calls it Nazi as well, is located, of all places, at Dachau, a name synonymous with death. The secret black intelligence organization directing the new Underworld Order offensive is known as DVD, Deutsche Verteidigungsdienst. The head of DVD, until he fell ill in 1976, was Admiral Canaris. British intelligence sources informed the author that the present actual head of DVD is George Bush Sr. This was in 2006. I wonder who they're going to replace him with. Could it be Angela Merkel? I don't know. Dr. Henry Kissinger may have served briefly as the de facto DVD chief, while George Bush Sr. doubled as Director of Central Intelligence. The other thing I wanted to talk about is that the fact that these people who run the world, the Synarchy, the secret services, the intelligence community, there's no nationality. They could be English agents, American, Russians. They just operate in a completely different world, financially, militarily. There's another book here by him, International Currency Review. This one here, and I'll read from here what he says. He says, private equity, pools of collectivized fiat money to mask source of funds. I mean, what's his name? Jay Powell, chairman of the Federal Reserve. He was a counsel or lawyer for private equity group Carlyle Group, which was basically a Bush family private equity, right? So that kind of makes sense. Yeah, this was issued in third quarter 2007, International Currency Review. I haven't found a link to this, but let's get back to the New Wonder Old Order. And the thing that made me look again at Christopher's story is all the brouhaha, all the saga surrounding Brexit. And I'll also put a link above in the cards and below in the description to a video he made about the EU corruption in 2009. And it's interesting that he died less than a year after that, which is suspect in my opinion. And in this video, he talks about how the EU Commission, and this was 2009, had not had its accounts independently audited for the last 14 years. And there are a lot of people out there. I was talking to my wife and she said, James O'Brien of LBC, people have called about this. And he always says, well, their accounts are public. You can find them on the internet. But what people haven't said to him is actually they haven't been independently audited or signed off. And Christopher's story talks about how in the normal business world, if you're running a business and your accounts are not audited and signed off, you are that's a criminal offense. So he basically talks about how by paying VAT money to the EU Commission, the British government is actually complicit to a crime. So what happened? The guy, he was born in 1938, so he would have been about 80 years old now. Back then, 2010, he was about 72. He could have died of natural causes, but it seems a bit suspect. So I highly recommend this video. And then the other thing that he published actually in this book, and it's also in this book, is this here. And as you can see here, it says Europäische Wirtschaftsgemeinschaft. So what does that mean? Well, it's German for European Economic Community. And this is basically, he found this at the British Library and Preußische Staatsbibliothek in Berlin, or the Berlin State Library. Basically a cover of a compendium of lectures conducted in 1941 by the German government. And don't forget, 1941, Germany was under a Nazi government, right? The Reichs government. It was a Nazi government. And they talk about how they want to create an European economic community. And why did they do that? Well, according to Christopher's story, is because they realized a 50 chance that they'd lose the war. So they wanted to continue their power subversively and covertly. And that goes to that comment by President Kennedy about secret, all these secret groups who aren't, running things. And I think this is what he was talking about. And Christopher's story mentions that as well. He says that it was the same people, the Synarchy that organized, the assassination of President Kennedy. So what happened? Why is this important? The EEC? Well, because the EEC evolved into the European Union. And it's interesting, the other day I saw a headline, I think it was yesterday, in the Times of London, and it was partly in German. It said bitte, which means please. Germans want the British to stay. It sounds very nice, doesn't it? Oh, please stay in the European Union. But when you read about the deception that there is in the world, it's kind of, how can I say, it makes you think twice. What about Trump? So basically, Christopher Story is saying that British government has been subverted actually by DVD, which is the intelligence arm of the Illuminati, the Nazis, and he even talks about Heath, who was the prime minister when they voted to join the EEC, that he is an asset, of course, of the DVD, and that ever since then, doesn't matter what party, it's been infiltrated. And maybe Brexit is for real. Maybe people woke up. I don't know. But what I think is happening is very uncertain. And the same thing in the US. He talks about they infiltrated as well, the DVD. How do they do it? Well, through the CIA, Operation Paperclip. So according to him, these are the people in charge. This is the New World Order. And the other interesting thing he talks about the New World Order, it's not that it's a new order. He talks about order is like a Freemasonic term, and that new world just means that it's an order that it will be established in the United States to run the world. So that's very interesting. I've highlighted some of the interesting things he talks about here in this book. I know it's gone over, this video is running a bit, but it is the weekend and this is a really interesting subject. So one thing he talks about, because of this Synarchy, the secret government or shadow government, is about the vertical and horizontal world. And I'll read here. It says, another way of focusing, and I'm quoting this, another way of focusing upon what follows is perhaps to think of the following simple model. Let us say that for the purposes of clarification, the perceived world of presidents, parliaments, congresses, monarchies, judges, courts, businesses, tax collectors, political collectives, trade unions, banks, and the stock market is the vertical world. Within this vertical world, relationships are clearly defined. So this vertical world is what we see happening, right? That's why for me, I'm not claiming to know anything, because is this the real world, this vertical world we're seeing? I don't think so. And he goes on to say, cabinets are presided over by prime ministers. The United States has a constitution until it is suspended in a way. He puts it in brackets, that comment, to which American citizens defer. Trade unions are led by well-known political agitators. Military personnel report to their superiors. Businessmen must adhere to a well-understood chain of responsibility, and so on. Relationships are generally overt, well understood and respected. So this is the world that we are told is out there, right? And then he goes on to say, what this special analysis will address is a parallel, hidden, horizontal world. Within this secretive, murky environment, this is the Synarchy, relationships exist which ruthlessly cut across those prevailing in the overt vertical world. And this is what I found interesting, what he says here. The relationships and linkages prevailing in the horizontal world are largely unknown to the inhabitants of the vertical world. So what he's actually saying is not only us who don't know what's happening in this horizontal world, but almost all the inhabitants in the vertical worlds. And that means presidents, parliaments, congresses. It's amazing in my opinion. And that's that's why I'm not claiming to know everything. Because the two often clash, inexplicable developments may occur in the vertical world, which defy rational explanation. And to me, that is what I think is happening now. That's what the Trump phenomenon, the Brexit phenomenon, the Gilets jaunes or yellow vest phenomenon in France is. It's something in the horizontal world that's happening that is, in my opinion, apocalyptic, so to speak. And by that, I don't mean the end of the world, but I mean that it's going to reveal things that we never dreamt of. And maybe the horizontal world will be exposed. Who knows? I mean, I've only scratched the surface here in this video about this book. I might make some more videos about it. So what's my conclusion? Well, my conclusion is that we are in the vertical world and we have very little idea of what's going on. But I think thanks to the work of Christopher Story, I think there's great conflict in this horizontal world that affects the vertical world, and that's why I think things are going to remain very uncertain politically and financially. And for me, the best way politically and financially to protect yourself is basically not to depend on the political system, on their welfare state, on government largesse. Try to be self-sufficient, independent. Try to be outside that system. And in the financial world, the same thing. Of course, it's difficult to withdraw completely from this vertical world, which is affected by the horizontal world. But there are ways, like owning physical gold and silver, not playing the financial game, having too much fiat money in the bank, for example. You're financing indirectly this horizontal world. And I would say the offshore hedge fund world is probably where this horizontal world parks, not probably, but most certainly where these people, this Synarchy, parks all their wealth. Does it mean to say that some people who have wealth offshore are part of this? No, but I would say definitely the Synarchy, the secret, the people who run things in secret that we don't even know, people that we don't even, probably never heard of. And of course, these people, though, are just a pawn of the people above them, which are people like the Rothschilds, the Rockefellers, the black nobility, probably in Europe. If you enjoyed this video, if you'd like to, give me a thumbs up. Or if you didn't like it, thumbs down. It doesn't matter. I don't mind criticism. Make sure you comment below. Tell me what you think of this kind of video. I thought it would be interesting. Make sure also you subscribe to the channel if you haven't yet. Don't forget to hit the little bell to be notified of my videos. And you can also follow me on DTube, Steemit, and on Twitter. I wish you all a great rest of the weekend, and I'll talk to you later. Take care. Bye.